One of the things I had to do when I was growing up was help out on our family's farm. During the summertime, I had a lot more work to do, but I didn't really mind it. I like being out and doing something helpful for the whole family. That and plus, farm work might have been hard, but it also did a lot to keep you in shape. From a young age, I started getting pretty strong pretty quickly. This happened when I was about 12 years old. I mostly remember the summer that it happened because it was a very hot one. I always liked the hot summers over the cold winters because there was so much more that you could do. I hated being kept inside over the winter and only being able to be outside for small amounts of time. This summer, however, was very hot. This happened before anyone thought about anything like global warming and stuff like that. My dad had gotten heat exhaustion several times that summer, and whenever he did, all the kids had to help out that much more. One morning, we noticed that one of the scarecrows had been knocked over. We kept them pretty secure, so this almost never happened. My dad was going to go out and fix it after he had taken care of some other chores, but it was another hot day, and he had gotten himself overheated yet again. My mom kept him inside at one point, against his own wishes, and I decided I was going to take care of that scarecrow. The scarecrows were elevated off the ground so they could be seen when the corn grew really tall. This was late summer, so the corn had grown a fair bit. I took the wooden ladder out there and did my best hauling the scarecrow back up so I could refasten it. It wasn't particularly heavy, but it was pretty awkward getting it up that high. While I was fixing the scarecrow, it felt like a rock or something had been thrown at me from somewhere behind me. It hit me right in the back. I turned around, expecting to see one of my brothers out in the field, but there wasn't anyone there that I could see. I chalked it up to nothing important and went back to what I was doing. It only took a few moments until I was once again hit with something. This time it hit me right in the back of the head, and it actually hurt quite a lot. I began calling out the names of my older brothers, who I thought were doing this to me. I told them to leave me alone. No one responded. There was no giggling or anything like that. Normally, my brothers would giggle quite a lot when they were teasing me. The third time this happened, I started getting really pissed off. The rock had hit me right in the back of the head again, and this time it managed to even draw blood. I told my brothers to knock it off, or I would tell my dad they were interrupting the farm work. None of my brothers would have continued after that because they were scared to death of the whooping my dad would have given them. Then, though, I looked out and I saw someone standing there in the corn. I couldn't make out much of them since they were hidden behind all the stalks, but I could tell it was clearly not one of my brothers. I could see a part of his face, and he had a sick, depraved maniac look on his face. He was standing a good 10 meters away from me and was absolutely the freakiest person I'd ever seen. It only took one movement toward me to get me really moving. I jumped down off the ladder, and I began running as fast as I could out of the field. It was not easy to do, but it was just as hard for the other guy to chase me. Plus, I was young and in tremendous shape, so I was able to escape the field and run up to where one of my brothers was doing some work. I told him what happened and that some guy was chasing me. My brother Elliot was 19 years old and a big, muscular farm boy. He always carried a knife on him, so he took it out and went over to look. For a moment, we both saw the guy just standing inside the corn. Even my brother stopped in hesitation at the strange appearance of this man. We only saw him for a few brief moments as he turned around and ran back into the field. My brother chased after him. I guess he wanted to give the guy a good ass beating. But the man was able to give him the slip. Elliot went ahead and took care of the scarecrow because there was no way I was going back out there. He also searched for the guy a bit more, but we were never able to find him. Many years back, a friend and I were making a cross-country trip by motorcycle. It was the way that we most liked to travel, but it did have its drawbacks. One major one was that it was extremely uncomfortable to be driving in the rain. Sometimes the rain from the storms would impact you so hard, it felt like daggers stabbing into your body. On this day, we were trying to get a lot of miles in. However, the sky was covered in dark black and green clouds by noon. It almost looked like it was night out, but it hadn't even started raining yet. We decided to try and get as many miles behind us as we could before it started raining. As we were moving in the same direction the storm was moving, we were able to make it pretty far on that day. We even drove for a little longer once it started raining. However, it inevitably became way too dangerous for us to remain out. We pulled off at an exit and found a motel. There wasn't much else around that exit area, and the motel was pretty seedy looking. It was cheap and beggars couldn't be choosers though. There was a fast food restaurant right across the street, so after getting a room key, I went to grab us some food while my friend went to the room. He had done all the driving, so I felt like I wanted to contribute something at least. At the restaurant, there weren't that many people, but there was this guy who kept watching me from the very moment I took a single step inside. He gave me a big creepy smile, and I gave him a polite smile back. He could not take his eyes off me the whole time I was in there. He even came up to me at one point and asked if he could buy me a coffee. I politely declined as I didn't think I'd ever be seeing him again, and let him know I was in a hurry to get back to my motel room. I left and he followed me out of the restaurant. He watched as I crossed the street back to the motel side. I could feel him watching me every step of the way. I even glanced back across the street when I was unlocking the room's door. He was still just standing outside watching me. I felt a lot better when I got into the room. It finally became nighttime, not like it hadn't been dark the entire time. My guy friend was exhausted and decided to get some sleep. I stayed up to watch some television in the dark. I wasn't feeling very tired yet. A while later, I began to hear some noise. At first, I wasn't sure what it was, but then I noticed it was coming from the door. This was an old motel and had regular doorknobs on the room. It sounded like someone was trying to turn it from the outside. If you've ever heard a doorknob rattle from the other side, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't move or wake up my friend. I just waited to see what would happen. It could have been another person going to the wrong room. After the noise stopped, I saw something out of the corner of my eye at the window though. I hadn't remembered to close the drapes once I'd gotten in. The creepy guy from the restaurant was peeking in through the window, watching me from the outside. He didn't leave or move when I saw him. He just continued to watch me, then licked the window in a way that maybe he thought was seductive. Really, it was just creepy and weird though. I yelled and woke my guy friend up. He saw what was happening, and the creepy guy finally saw him. He had no way of knowing I wasn't by myself until then. When he saw the size of my friend, he obviously got scared and took off running. My friend, pissed off, ran to the door. He opened it and yelled at the guy, but didn't attempt to chase him or anything. I don't understand some people. How could they think that such creepy behavior would attract a woman in any way? Years ago, I worked at this small 24-hour gym. It had a weight room with a few treadmills and other machines. Then there was a small locker room, and that was about it. I would work overnights and would be the only employee there. The way the gym was set up was that you would walk in the front doors and down a hallway about 50 feet long or so. Then there was a front desk where I would sit, and to my left it opened up to the main weight room and stuff. I only worked there for 6 months, but that was enough time for something really weird to happen. The gym was located in a pretty average area. It wasn't right in the city, but it also wasn't in the middle of nowhere or anything. Overnights, not that many people would show up, though the gym wasn't that large to begin with and didn't have a lot of members anyway. One night, I was all by myself. Nobody else was in the gym at all. By now, it was probably close to 2 in the morning. I was pretty bored as I sat there behind the front counter. The front door to the gym suddenly opened. I looked over and saw a man walk in. I had never seen this guy before, but I assumed he must be a member. He was sort of tall and thin and had a very rugged look to him. He walked over to the front desk, then attempted to walk right past me. He didn't even look in my direction. I stopped the man before he could enter. "Excuse me, sir, you have to scan in." The man stopped in his tracks and turned around. He looked at me, but he didn't say anything. He then turned and walked right back out the front door. It was really weird. I was thinking maybe he'd forgotten his membership card in his car or something. After the man walked out of the building, he went to the right and out of my view. We had a large window on both sides of the front door which was glass, so I could see out of it. My view was of one section of the parking lot and a little bit of the street behind it. There were many parts I could not see though. I didn't see the man or his car anywhere. I could only see empty parking spaces as far as the eye could see. Some time went by and I figured the guy had just left. It was a pretty weird deal though. I was sitting at my desk when I randomly looked up and happened to see that the guy was now back. He was standing at the window outside, right next to the front door. He was looking in but not walking inside. When I noticed him, he slipped around to the side and out of my view. He showed up again less than a minute later, looking at me from the other side of the window. It was all just really strange. When he saw I was still looking, he slipped out of sight again. I was trying to figure out what exactly was going on here. Probably 5 minutes went by, and the man came back. This time, he actually did walk inside. I got a bad feeling immediately. After making it about 5 feet in the door, he just turned around and walked back out. I was relieved to see him go, but I was even more weirded out now. He then stood outside the door by the window and just kept staring at me. When I looked at him this time, he didn't try to move away or react at all. He just kept staring. Eventually, I had to look away, but when I looked back, he was still watching me. He kind of waved me outside, like he was motioning me to leave the gym and come to him. Needless to say, I did not get up. The man then slipped to the side and out of my sight yet again. I didn't know what to make of all this bizarre behavior. It gets even crazier though. Just seconds after he left the window, I heard the sounds of a car engine starting and then squealing tires. I saw a car drive extremely fast through the parking lot from the right side. It left and jumped over the curb out onto the street. Really reckless behavior. I saw the car shoot out onto the road and then out of my sight. Then I heard a police siren and police cars with flashing lights going down the street after them. Things then went back to normal, and the guy did not return. I was just left wondering what on earth he was doing. For the longest time, I was really creeped out about it. I still have no idea what he was attempting to do. Sometimes I think I just have bad luck. I'm almost 30 years old and can't seem to find myself a nice partner to settle down with. I've gone on a million dates, I've tried the whole Tinder thing, I even had friends set me up on blind dates. I just can't seem to find that connection, no matter how hard I try. The story I'm about to tell you happened to me a few years ago, and I don't know if it was just desperation or plain old bad luck. It still haunts me to this day. It started on a beautiful summer day. I happened to be off from work on a Saturday, which basically never happened. I decided to try and make the most of it. I had recently moved to a new neighborhood a few months prior to the events of this story. I was kind of excited to see that my neighborhood was having a bunch of yard sales. I usually worked on Saturdays and tended to miss things like this. The fact that I could actually check them out really thrilled me. I visited a few houses on my street. They weren't really selling anything that interested me though. As I continued to make my way through the neighborhood, I stopped at a house that was selling a bunch of guitars and drum sets. Since I played guitar myself, I was interested right away. I grabbed this lime green acoustic one the guy was selling. While I was inspecting the instrument, I heard a voice call out from behind me. "Hey, sweet guitar, you play?" I turned around and said yes at the same time. What I wasn't expecting to see was a cute woman smiling at me. She absolutely was my type, dressed in a punk rock style covered in tattoos, and most notably had some really cool green hair. I'm not one to engage with people so easily, but she had a certain charm about her that sucked me right in. We ended up making small talk for nearly half an hour, right in this poor guy's yard sale. Finally, the guy just said I had to either buy the guitar or leave, since I'd been holding it the entire time. I told the girl it was nice meeting her, and then went and paid the guy. I remember walking home with the guitar in hand, kind of beating myself up that I didn't even ask for her contact information. I didn't even get her name. I remember feeling a rush of joy. From several feet behind me, I heard her voice. She called out to me to stop, and when I did, she ran over and grabbed my hand. "I know this sounds crazy, but I really like talking to you, and we had a connection, you know? I think it'd be crazy if we both ignored it. Would you want to hang out sometime?" I was so excited. I was trying to play it cool. I remember laughing and telling her my name, to which she replied hers. She said her name was Moon. Yes, Moon. We joked and continued our small talk for another few minutes. I eventually worked up the courage to ask her out for a drink, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when she said yes. We went to a local bar, had a few drinks, one thing led to another, and I asked her to come back to my place. Again, she went with it. We had an amazing night. We stayed up for a while playing Mario Party and ended the night on a high note. I went to bed in one of the best moods I'd ever been in. That very quickly changed when I woke up at around 4 in the morning. I noticed that she wasn't lying next to me anymore. I sat up in bed and noticed my bedroom door was shut as well, which I never did. I snuck over to the door and slowly opened it. I thought I could hear the sound of breaking glass coming from downstairs. I was still groggy from waking up, so I wasn't moving fast yet. I was going down the stairs shouting Moon's name. Before I went all the way down, I heard her yell something, and then heard the back door slam. I finally started to move, and that's when I noticed I was too late. My kitchen had been completely destroyed. There was glass everywhere. Anger turned to sadness. This woman had not only trashed my kitchen, but also robbed me blind. My records were gone, my guitars were. I had a china cabinet that had a bunch of family relics in it, and all of that had been destroyed. She had taken everything I had of real value and ran out the back door. My logic was telling me there was no way she could have carried all that stuff out by herself, but when I got outside, she was nowhere to be found. Reality started to set in. I realized just how hard I had been played. This woman had a plan all along, and she had to have had someone else with her, because she never would have been able to get away so fast on her own. I obviously reported this to the police, but nothing ever came of it. I could describe her appearance quite well, but nobody matching her description was ever caught. Moon must have been a fake name, because nobody in the area knew about her when I asked. When I reflect on this now years later, I noticed some red flags, like where did she come from that day? I never bothered to ask, but she hadn't driven a car. I had assumed she lived in the neighborhood. She was dependent on me the entire evening, and instead of looking at this as some type of issue, I was more into the idea she needed me. I never did get my stuff back, and now I'm more careful and selective with who I bring to my home. Be careful, because sometimes the people you think you can trust turn out to be the monsters right under your nose the entire time. My name is Emily, and this happened to me in the spring of 2022. I was living by myself in an apartment at the time, and I worked in the city. I have an Instagram page that has a few thousand followers. I'm not famous by any means, and I'm certainly not an Instagram model either, but I do post there very frequently. One night, I got a text message from one of my friends. It was a link to an Instagram page. My friend said, "Hey, isn't this you?" I clicked on the profile, and it was an Instagram account claiming to be me, except it wasn't using my name but a different one. They'd posted quite a few pictures, and all were of me. I think the account had about 100 posts or so. This had been going on for several months. Most of the pictures were pictures I had already posted on Instagram before. They had a decent amount of followers too. I think they had about 500 or so maybe. I couldn't believe it. Whoever was running this account was just screenshotting my stuff and posting it to their own. Nobody seemed to realize this entire page was a fraud. I looked at some of the comments, and they were all saying things like, "Wow, you're beautiful." As I scrolled through and looked at more of the pictures, I noticed something strange. All of the pictures were of me, but some had been posted that were not from my Instagram page. They were pictures of me, but I'd never posted those photos before. I didn't know how that person had them. The pictures weren't bad or anything, but I had no clue how they managed to get a hold of them. I sent a direct message to the page, asking who they were and why they were trying to steal my identity. I then reported them not long after I sent that message. I tried to check again a short time later and found out they'd blocked me. I told a few of my friends about it, and they said they would report the page as well. Within a couple of days, the page ended up getting shut down, and I was glad it was now gone. I still wondered who had done it though. Well, a few days after the page was taken down, I left my apartment one morning, only to find a note taped to my door. When I looked at it, I realized it was from whoever had been running that Instagram page. The note talked about how this person could get any information from me that they wanted. They also rambled about how I thought I must be so cool because I was popular, and some other random stuff. When I got this, I went straight to the police. Whoever this was knew where I lived, and seemed to somehow be able to hack into my accounts. After telling the police all the information I could, I created new accounts for almost everything. I changed all my passwords and all that sort of stuff. Luckily for me, I also moved out of that apartment just a few weeks later because my lease was up. After I managed to move and change all my account information, nothing else like that happened. The experience was very strange. I still don't know who was doing that at all. My current working theory is that it could have possibly been an old high school classmate who didn't like me or something. It could be a totally random stranger though. I really don't have any way to find out. When I was 15, I found a job in a local newspaper for a live-in babysitter. It was summer and I wanted to make some money. I lived in a rural area and did not have transportation to get to a mall or fast food place to work, the usual jobs for teens. There was no public transportation where I lived, and no jobs in the rural town I lived in either. I called the number for the live-in babysitting job, and a man answered. I found out he was a divorced man with 2 young children. They were school-aged, around elementary, and were home for summer vacation. He needed someone to watch them while he was at work. He spoke to my mother on the phone and somehow got her to agree to allow me to do this job. As an adult, I question so many of her decisions, and certainly this one. He picked me up and drove me to his house. While driving, he told me he had actually gotten re-engaged. He said his fiancée was his former babysitter, and she was just a year older than I was. As a 15-year-old at the time, this didn't set off any alarm bells. I just thought it was weird that someone my age would want to be with an old man like this. He was in his late 30s to mid-40s. I remember thinking it was weird too when I was taking the children for a walk, and a woman who lived in the neighborhood gave me an odd and concerned look, like something was wrong with me walking those children. I smiled and waved, and she simply looked away and ignored me. I didn't give it much thought though. It all just seemed a little bit strange, and that was it. The house was a split-level home, a style where the floor levels are split. The main living area and the bedrooms were on the top level. The lower level had just a living room area and a single bedroom. That was my assigned room. Not long after I began living in the home to babysit for this guy, he began to try and sneak into my room after he thought I had gone to bed. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by this. He would always act friendly when I caught him, and asked me if I wanted a beer like he was cool with that. I would always say no and wait for him to leave, then slam the door shut. Eventually, after a while of this, I told him I no longer felt safe doing this job and forced him to take me back home. I didn't fully understand at the time, but he was a predator who was trying to groom me into being another babysitter in a relationship with him. I knew enough at the time to know something was not right about the situation, and thankfully that was enough for something to tell me to get out of there before he could do anything further. I never wanted to tell this story to anyone for years. I don't know why, but here I am now. I was 16 years old, and sometimes I would spend some time at my grandmother's to get some alone time and privacy. My grandmother lived alone, and many people in her building knew nothing about me. The floor where my grandmother lived had 2 more apartments, one of which was rented out but was vacant at that time, and the other was having some inheritance issues, I guess, so no one was using that one either. My grandmother went on a trip, which everyone in the building knew about. They have some Facebook group, I guess. I wanted to be alone, so I decided to keep an eye on it for her. The first night went okay, but around 3 in the morning while I was talking to some friends, I heard a strange sound at the door. I was wearing headphones. At that moment, everything faded out, both in game and in conversation with my friends. I went to go check what was going on. I heard the sound of the lock. I looked out through the peephole and saw a man trying to break in. He had a scarf covering his whole face and a cap as well. He was using some sort of tool to try and break the lock. Actually, he managed to get one of the latches open. Thank God there were 2 of them. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. Now, I would have reacted much better, but I went to go grab the family sword, which was hanging on the wall of the room. I stood by the door. I heard him trying to break the other lock and get in. I shouted out, "Who are you?" He froze but continued trying to break in after a short while. "If you come in here, I'm gonna stab you with this sword." The man continued to try and break in. Finally, I just said, "The police are already on their way." I lied because I hadn't had an opportunity to call them yet. The man just got up and walked away. It turned out the guy didn't even live in that building, because after 2 months I got to know everyone there, and nobody moved out during that time. He was not amongst the residents. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.